The world's most highly indebted nations, also bizarrely known as the world's richest nations or most economically developed nations, face record levels of debt that simply cannot be contained within the existing monetary framework. Over time, this will ensure that some form of universal basic income becomes inevitable. Fundamentally, this is because all debts, public and private, are only manageable if spending stays high and incomes don't collapse. The revealed preference of many Western governments simply choose to focus on policies of structural decline rather than pursuing any notion of economic growth and prosperity for their citizens. Thus, the key tool in managing debt loads is to focus on debt-to-GDP ratios and stabilising these levels. This is commonly known as nominal GDP management. Nominal GDP is the combination of real output growth and inflation. The trick is to ensure that nominal GDP exceeds interest rates. Therefore, assuming all other things remain equal, if nominal GDP exceeds interest rates, the debt to GDP ratio stabilises or even falls. This is the equivalent of households' income growth at, say, 6%, while interest rates on their existing debt might be 3%. But if interest rates exceed nominal GDP, debt dynamics worsen unless compensated for by fiscal tightening. Thus, interest rates would be higher than income growth. Consequently, we've seen the money supply increase dramatically, which supports the progressive devaluation of all existing currency units. This is classic financial repression, the engineering of inflation which exceeds interest rates, and thus real rates remain negative. What this does is to quietly transfer wealth from savers to borrowers. This is the so-called cost of living crisis in a nutshell. And the biggest borrowers, of course, are governments and corporations. Structural decline seems likely to be accelerated by increased automation and the impact of AI, which is not being developed to enhance the productivity of humankind and capital in unison, as was seen in prior industrial revolutions. Instead, it seems intended to disintermediate labour altogether. Indeed, AI and automation are eroding wage income faster than the tax base can actually adapt. As wages weaken, so does consumption. And without consumption, debt becomes impossible to service. So a highly indebted system needs household incomes to stay stable. Otherwise, tax receipts decline, debt service problems arise, defaults increase, and the situation for the financial system becomes increasingly precarious. So the system therefore needs regular income injections. We've already heard numerous billionaires previously promoting the idea of making UBI payments to combat rising unemployment. And this isn't for welfare reasons, but instead keeps the debt machine from stalling and, of course, avoids any civil unrest. But there's a problem. Within the current monetary framework, debt loads are too large, and tax increases have limits, for now at least. While most central banks are legally barred from directly financing the government as well. And crucially, a government cannot guarantee persistent demand for their debt. So ongoing transfers are impossible right now. But the new monetary architecture is changing. The system is being redesigned from the back end. Your digital money and bank accounts will still appear the same on the screen, and crazily, most people will not understand just how dramatic a change has actually taken place to their money in the background. We're seeing CBDCs being created, stable coins, permanent liquidity facilities, and fiscal and monetary policy coordination between governments and central banks that would have been unthinkable in the past. And if you think CBDCs are bad, well, you really need to understand the concept of the unified ledger. I'll link to this video at the end, and I'll do a deep dive on this concept as everyone really needs to understand this. But the point is that despite front-end appearances, money is changing dramatically, and that money can be coded to automatically buy and hold government debt. In a tokenized system, debt demand becomes built in. So if you consider the UK and its role in pioneering and piloting the unified ledger model, a plausible scenario could work as follows. The central bank creates money, which can then be used to credit banks. The rules within the code can then ensure that this money is converted into short-term debt, and individual bank accounts are then credited with tokenized bank deposits. Alternatively, transmission can take place through stablecoin issuance. Now, central bank money is deposited with issuers who then buy the government debt and credit individual accounts. In both examples, you have immediate built-in demand for government debt, and those holding the UBI are actually proxy holders of government debt tokens. So it's worth just breaking that down again. Coded money rails automatically support sovereign debt by providing a continuous programmable buyer of last resort. Regular citizen transfers become easiest to sustain because part of the transfer cycles back into government debt, while transactions on that UBI will then be taxed, and that helps to service the debt. This strengthens the sovereign balance sheet and lowers refinancing risks, as UBI payments will need to increase over time. Remember the need to keep nominal GDP in excess of interest rates. UBI now becomes a closed-loop liquidity cycle, which keeps the debt system afloat. It's financial alchemy on steroids. So just to reiterate why this will be a necessity. First, high debt economies cannot survive big drops in household spending. Second, wages can no longer guarantee steady spending. Third, governments need a new way of maintaining stable demand for their debt. Fourth, programmable money is the game changer here. And fifth and finally, it closes a financing loop. Debt holders such as banks, stablecoin issuers and central banks will continue to obtain the income stream or yield on gilts, treasury bills and so on, but the public becomes proxy holders of the debt. Now, don't expect this to be a generous payment, more of a minimum income floor at best. But the reality is that it's maintenance of the ongoing Ponzi financial system. But it's built to break, for in the long run, the model breaks, and this is because you need increasingly large transfers to sustain demand. Moreover, there is no intention to raise productivity, and thus the real income of most countries will stagnate at best. So in reality, UBI is state support of weak wage income, weak growth, increased financialization courtesy of artificially created demand for government debt, and an ever-expanding sovereign debt base. They won't call it a UBI, of course. The term is politically toxic. It may initially be targeted and gradual, yet it will expand. But functionally, it will be a UBI, a permanent income floor designed to sustain sovereign debt demand, not to uplift citizens. Now, the implications of this are, of course, profound, and we'll explore those in upcoming videos. So do consider subscribing. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.